Alisia, thank you for coming by today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, being a pharmacist, give us a little intake into your world, especially nowadays when you have so many people questioning medicine and everything. I want you to be able to kind of explain how do you become a pharmacist?
So just basic things is you just need a bachelor's degree. It doesn't have to be in any kind of science. I personally wasn't a science major at all when I was in college. And you do just have to do certain requirements like chemistry, math, physics, there's even like a public speaking class that you have to take. And then once you do that, you get all your requirements. You also have to be vaccinated as well. And then you can apply to pharmacy school. And that takes about 4 years. And then you can choose to do residency, which can be 1 to 2 years. And then you take your pharmacy license exams, which are your law exams, and then just your general knowledge exams.
So you mentioned like you had to be vaccinated. I'm assuming, did they also add the COVID-19 restrictions on that as well now?
I don't know obviously it hasn't been around long enough, or when I applied to pharmacy school. Okay. I would imagine so, just because you are going to be working in different clinics, and pharmacies that do requirement, and just all the healthcare, environments and whatnot.
Gotcha. So probably a good assumption to make that's become a requirement across the board, even med schools and everything else then? Yeah. Okay. And then while you're so you said you have to take a public speaking course.
Yes.
Is that a mandatory course then?
I think it depends on the schools. The schools that I applied to in California, they all required that public speaking.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that actually helped your...
I think for me, it didn't necessarily, just because I was already comfortable with it. I took smaller classes because I wasn't a science major. Right. I only had classes of like 40 kids. So we were always talking in front of each other, giving presentations and whatnot. But I can see where it did benefit with other people, just because we are doing a lot of consultations, and people aren't thinking of pharmacists as these forefront professionals. So it is a little bit awkward to be talking to someone, even though we do it all day, every day.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like, I've taken pre-med classes before. That was like my initial thing. I was going the pre-med route. And you would assume like, anyone in pre-med, for example, like doctors and all that, they're also always talking to the public and like individually or to a mass. And I've never had to take that or been told to take that during that time. I don't know, maybe is that a new thing or?
I don't know. It was just one of the requirements, and I was just kind of like, really? Public speaking? Like, we're already talking to people all the time. We're giving consultations, whether it's a new medication or someone just comes up to the counter. Like, we're always talking to people. We're always on the phone. We're always calling different doctors' offices and whatnot. So it was a very random requirement. But I feel like it does benefit some people just because they are so used to just kind of being like, I'm just going to be studious and I'm not going to talk to anyone.
Right. Some people aren't necessarily as social as others, so it might help them out.
Yeah.
Not every pharmacist is going to be the nicest necessarily, but I guess you don't necessarily have to be as long as the information's getting out.
Yeah.
Maybe that, and also the fact that they're having all these classes now to where, not even classes, but I feel like especially in our generation, people are starting to be a lot more introverted. Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of staying out, and maybe this course is meant for people like that. Yeah. And when you come across those people, maybe this is going to become something that they should definitely take, because I know I have a lot of friends that have become introverts, or they were already introverts, and then this just made them more comfortable in today's society. And you see those people in public, and it's awkward. Yeah. It's awkward for them. They don't know how to talk to each other, or even simply just people that maybe, that you don't have to be an introvert. Maybe they got used to the fact that there's no social interaction. Yeah.
And when I was in pharmacy school, they made us take like this Myers-Briggs personality test. And then everyone got their results. And then what they did is they paired us up into teams. So if you were extroverted, they mostly put you with introverted people and vice versa, just to see how that interaction would play out. But also because they promoted a lot of interprofessional work, you are going to be talking to other professionals. So I mean, I think that's just where it comes from. It's just here, let's have you learn to speak, but also how to actually structure what you're going to say rather than just kind of throwing everything out.
Did they tell you guys that they were going to do that beforehand, or did they tell you afterwards that they were going to mix introverts and extroverts?
They told us afterwards. Like they were just like, here's your test during orientation, and then at the end of orientation, they were like, we're going to put you guys into groups, and then they were like, talk about which what results you got.
Right.
And then we kind of just quickly realized, like, okay, so this person's super extroverted and this one's introverted, and it was a team of 6, so it was just a lot of personalities, and I mean, it was a cool way to kind of get to know everyone. But it also kind of forced you out of your comfort zone, or to also kind of like learn to check yourself if you are that extroverted person.
Do you think it's necessary to have more of an introverted style person? Like, say maybe they're more professional even though they're not as social? Or do you think that just kind of it's on the individual?
I think it's on the individual. Like I know a lot of what they call extroverted, introverted people, where they are extroverted, but they're only extroverted when they're in a very comfortable setting, and vice versa. We have a lot of introverted people who can be extroverted in a small group, but when it becomes a big group, they're just like, I'm going to stand in the corner.
Right. I know many people like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I apologize, and also to the viewers. I had a phone call. I didn't realize that it was still connected to the Bluetooth. That's
He's a famous man. He's a famous man.
No, no. So I apologize for that if it bothered. But yeah, so like, I mean, you can totally tell like I'm an introvert, right? So, so they try to teach you that skill, right? Like to identify. So I'm also assuming, because you're probably going to have patients that are not necessarily comfortable with talking about their problems or whatever they may be going through. So you kind of have to help them, I guess, get to the common ground where you kind of get them to say what they need to say before you do the assessment.
Yeah.
So on top of that, like, how hard is it to get into pharmacy school?
I mean, it's highly competitive. I mean, with all kinds of medical schools and whatnot. The nice thing is that California has about 13 schools. So you do hear a lot, like, we're being oversaturated. Classroom sizes are way too big. I mean, I personally didn't think it was too difficult. I think the application process was very difficult because I had to write about myself, and I had to really think about, was I mature enough to get into pharmacy school? And I think the writing aspect, kind of tripped a lot of people up as well, just because, we're so science-based that we're not used to writing these long papers and whatnot. I mean, for me, I came from a different major, so I was used to writing 10-page papers, but to try to condense it into like 2 pages was the hardest part for me.
So then you weren't always trying to get into pharmacy school. You had a different plan before?
So when I was in middle school, I always wanted to help people and just do something in the health field. I just didn't know if I wanted to be so health-based. So when I was in middle school, my sister gave me this, it's like a medical professions kind of algorithm. And she's like, if you want to be a doctor, you need to do this, this, and this. You want to be a pharmacist, you need to do this, this, and this. And I was kind of like, I wanted to do the doctor route, but I felt like all the experiences I personally had with doctors were very difficult. Like, I'd be in and out in 15 minutes and not really feel like I actually made a connection with anybody. So I still did all my science and math. And then when I went to undergrad, I did apply as a biology major. I was that for about a year. And then I was like, you know what? I can't do these class sizes where it's like 300 kids, where I'm like swallowed up in a lecture hall. I want to be more focused, but I still had pharmacy in the back of my mind. So I changed majors. I went the humanities route, and then I still did all my science classes on the side, just in the case that, I still did want to do pharmacy, but my mind never left pharmacy.
See, that's awesome. That's also a misconception, because I know I fall in the same boat where I was a bio major at first, and I'm like, okay, I have to be a bio major to go the pre-med route. And then I was thankful that I found a friend who was going to who was about to start med school, and he's like, no, you don't have to do that, because growing up, there wasn't much information. I'm a first generation here. My sister was the only one that really went to, or both of my sisters went to college. But then they were the only ones to really have, they had to create their own path, right? Like, they didn't have the guidance that I had. They were my guidance. Right. But at the same time, it's like none of us were aware of becoming, or what the roadmap was to get into med school. So the only thing we've heard is, oh, well, bio classes. So you pair that up with bio major because all you're taking is bio classes and all that. So, and I took that and I'm like, and then the friend I'm talking about that was entering med school, he was like, you know, you're wasting time and you're also creating extra headaches because there are so many classes there that you don't need, that don't teach anything. And not to say that you don't learn anything from those classes, but anything in particular that becomes useful to get into med school later.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, for someone like me, science is very practical, which is fun, which is what makes it fun, but also a headache like we were talking about, because I feel like some classes, no matter how interesting they are, sometimes if you have the wrong teacher, that practicality becomes a pain because you don't have anyone teaching you what you're doing. Or, you know, for example, I had, I'm not going to say any names on the podcast, but I've had, at Fresno State, I've had 2 teachers, right? One of them was my Bio 1B class. And for those that don't know, Bio 1B is basically a second semester. So Bio 1A, 1B, these are still beginner biology classes you take. And on the very first day there, he is like, you know, there's, like you were saying, there's 300 kids in the class. And his very first set of encouraging words were, all right, everyone, look to your left, look to your right. Only one of you will pass the class. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you know, when you already start with someone that has that type of ego, you already know what you're in for.
Yeah, exactly.
And then later down the road, when I was taking anatomy there, anatomy and physiology, we had one professor, and in anatomy, I learned that she also has that ego to her because she was the only one teaching. I don't know if she still is the only one teaching there. But it's like, you know, my group of friends and I, we had to really create our own study group to where we did YouTube videos, Khan Academy. It was amazing. You know, they became our best friends and our real teachers.
Yeah.
Wow. My friend Paul wrote the damn Bible. You know, he every chapter of anatomy, like he had a binder of summaries. So it was like literally the anatomy book 2.0 condensed.
Yeah.
And we really kind of, you know, fed off of each other there. And for example, like when we did our anatomy practical, I think there were probably 100 questions on the practical. And mind you, like I have an A by the end of that. You know, like I had an A throughout the entire semester until the very end, even the practical. Okay, so we just saw, all right, this is the bare minimum. I just needed a C to keep my A.
Right.
And so we did all that, and then we get an email. And the practicals are normally like the same week as the finals week. So we took it around 2 p.m. And then at 6 p.m., we got done around 4. Okay. And then at 6, she sent us all an email saying, hey, because there were, out of 100 again, there were markings on 4 questions, right? And she's like, even though 3 out of the 4 were incorrect, like whoever marked it, they weren't incorrect on 3 out of the 4. She doesn't condone cheating. Right? She didn't take into account that someone could have been tapping the pencil, whatever. You know, some people, they stress out, they start doing different things, or even if they did, like the point is only one of what they marked was correct. And because of that, she created a brand new practical, and she had us do it the very next day.
Whoa.
So something we had prepared for weeks, we had to prepare for a day, and I ended up getting a B in the class. By I think 1% or something like that. No. And then I learned from there that some of these teachers just have this ego to them.
Yeah.
Right.
And they know they can get away with it. And in physiology, it's the same teacher. I never attended one lecture. I mean, like I passed it, you know, I got a B. But at the same time, it's like I never attended her lecture. I don't think you really need to, because when you have teachers like that, you don't learn anything in the class anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
and that you shouldn't take it personal and think, oh, school's not for me or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Exactly. And so I fully understand what you mean when, and going back to it, I'm thankful. I am so glad that I didn't stick around with the bio major, because if I did, I don't know.
Damn, you
I
lost
didn't
your
even
mind.
like bio. I was like, what am I doing? Chem is my thing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why am I doing all these bio classes? And I was like,
Oh, so you had, so then why weren't you like a chemistry major?
I had a lot of friends who were chemistry majors, who were other science majors, and I felt like they were just living in the library. And as fun as that is, I was just like, you know what? I'm in college. I'm here to learn different things, trying to expand my mind and whatnot. So I was like, I'm going to take a less traditional approach,
Right.
but still have a plan, still, have my eye on the prize, and really enjoy my experience.
Yeah. So
so
then
that's
what
why I
would
changed.
you say would be your major influence for turning point to pharmacy?
So when I started, or into pharmacy in general,
Yeah.
I think
What
I
kinda sparked it?
had a good relationship with my pharmacist. It was like a random medication I had, and I went to go pick it up, or I went with my uncle to go pick it up.
Yeah.
And just the pharmacist was just at the very forefront. And I was like, this is the most accessible person like that I've ever met, in the medical field and whatnot,
Right.
with your doctor's appointments and dentists, you have to wait weeks and you have
Yeah,
to wait
yeah,
hours
yeah.
in the waiting room. And I was just kind of like, this person is so accessible. I was like, that's the person I want to be.
Almost too accessible.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No,
it
I
is.
agree. I
You guys
agree.
almost don't get nearly enough credit for that.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, people literally come and put like their foot on the counter and they're like, can you tell me
Right.
what's wrong? And I'm like, hey, hold on.
Right.
Yeah.
So then it's there's also different types of pharmacists too,
Yes,
right?
there are. So
So-
I'm a community pharmacist. I work at like one of the retail chains, and then there's hospital pharmacists, there are nuclear pharmacists, there are research pharmacists,
Right.
ambulatory, acute, there anything and everything that you can think of. There could potentially be a pharmacist there.
What I didn't know. Okay, so being a community pharmacist,
Mm-hmm.
can you please kind of like explain what you do on a daily basis? How is it different from other pharmacists? The positions that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so I work in a community pharmacy, so it's like just a retail chain. I essentially oversee my team of technicians and clerks. I do a lot of med checks. I make sure that medications are being dispensed correctly,
Right.
they're being filled correctly, that there are no drug-drug interactions. I'll call doctors' offices on clarifications, or if like dosings are wrong. I mean, and we essentially just make sure patients get all the knowledge that they need for their medications before they leave the pharmacy. Because literally, community pharmacists are the last person a patient sees before they go home with their medications. So we want to make sure that they are being safe and that they understand how to take them, how to dispose of them, and just, everything there is to know about these medications.
Gotcha. Okay, and then what I didn't know. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's a different pharmacy position, but pharmacists can also prescribe medication, correct?
Yes, if you're an advanced practice pharmacist, which means you did like a certain number of hours, you did like a residency, and it's a special license that you can get. Essentially, they still have to prescribe within their scope of practice, so that leads more to like acute and ambulatory pharmacists where they can do like disease management. So they can do like hypertension, or they can do I don't know what the other ones I'm thinking of. But yeah, just essentially hypertension, all of the diabetes management. Just those like regular, every day-to-day kind of.
So they could potentially prescribe their patients incorrectly as well.
Potentially, yes.
How would they go about that?
What do you mean?
Was it the same process like if a doctor, California, a lot of lawsuits happen?
Yes.
So, or do you guys try to stray away from that as much as possible because of that factor?
I mean, it's a very difficult license to get. There are only about, I think, a few hundred in California.
Wow.
Just because, like I said, it's a very strenuous process to kind of go through.
Yeah.
Most pharmacists that I have met that do prescribe meds are very straightforward. They have their formula, or they stick to the clinical guidelines, and they only prescribe based on those guidelines.
Do you ever deal with your patients' doctors?
All the time. All the
Okay.
time, yeah. It's they have this thing. It's called corresponding responsibility, where when a patient gets a prescribed a medication, there's the doctor's responsibility to make sure it's the correct medication, but it's also the pharmacist's responsibility to make
Right.
sure it's being taken correctly, or that it's even the right dose or the right medication for the correct indication. So oftentimes we will get into fights with, doctors' offices or disagreements and just say, hey, I don't think this is the best medication for this, for this condition.
Okay, so you can tell your doctor that, like, you don't agree
Yes.
with them necessarily.
So we have like the ability to, say, hey, I don't feel comfortable feeling this, and then asking as many questions as possible. So I mean, essentially that is what it is. Most often it's just like very basic things, like, it's like a 12-year-old gets her wisdom teeth pulled and they're like, here, you can take a Norco every 6 hours, and you're like, maybe let's start with like an ibuprofen or something. Let's not go to the hard stuff yet.
Gotcha. And I bet you there are doctors out there that are doing exactly that.
Yes.
Well, I was just going to ask that. Is that more of a myth or is that more of truth? The whole theory that doctors get paid more for the more pills that they pump out and so on.
I mean, I honestly don't know on the doctor's ends, but I mean, it does happen a lot more often. Like when I was in pharmacy school, I did a rotation in the ER, and a patient came in and was kind of having heartburn, and so the doctor was like, here's some Norco.
Right.
And I'm like,
a little shake.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if that's the best choice.
You see that often?
It is pretty often, especially with dentists and whatnot. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I've got my wisdom teeth pulled, and they were just kind of like, get some over the counter ibuprofen, you'll be fine.
Now, will you kind of rat the doctor out? Do you let someone know? Do you, like, I don't think they were prescribing correctly. They keep giving people Narcos and so on.
And we have the potential to do that if we feel like they're kind of abusing their power, or if it's just kind of out of their, their range of, what they're supposed to be prescribing.
Because they're still human.
Yeah.
Right.
And, and it's most often it's like the older doctors who are kind of like, no, we're used to this way. And we're like, yeah, we understand. But, there are other options. Let's talk about these options. And some do budge and some don't. And unfortunately, when there's a disagreement, we have to let them know, like, hey, we're not comfortable feeling this. If the patient wants to go somewhere else, they're more than welcome to.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that the whole thing about the older doctors or anything like that, because I had a friend that came on as a dietitian that talked about the same thing about like diets, and then the older dietitians, like what they do. And then it's the same thing with, we had a friend, he's a physical therapist, and he talked about the older generation and the new generation, how it's different. So it's weird that you're kind of, and I think it's because of the advancements in science, it's the education that continues to evolve.
Yeah.
And which is why I also think nowadays there's so much, not just misinformation everywhere, especially on social media, but it's you have people that are still believing in the old science and people that are believing in the new science. And then like the new science is like, the argument against it is, you don't have enough, I guess, experience or proof. Right. And then the old science is like, well, you're just not updated.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's funny that it starts to evolve into something that's like they can't just acknowledge that the science is what science is now.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
And so that's awesome that we have younger generations that are kind of going that route.
Yeah.
So then, like, being in pharmacy school, is there something strenuous that was pretty difficult to handle in terms of like, whether it's regarding mental health or physical health, did you have to like stay up and do all this additional, like, I want you to be real and raw about just how hard, or maybe it wasn't hard for you, but if it was, how hard was pharmacy school? It
was honestly, the schooling was something I was used to just because I've been going to school forever, what it felt like. I was fortunate enough to go to school here in Clovis. We did team-based learning, which meant that we worked in teams every semester. Your team could be 5 to 6 people. They had it kind of set where we would get our reading materials, and then we would kind of study that, go through it, try to understand as much as we can, come in the next day, take an individual quiz, and then take that quiz again as a team so that you can figure out, okay, why did I think this way? Why did that person think that way? And then we would do an activity based on that. The workload was pretty manageable, but if you missed a couple of days and it started to pile on, just like any kind of schooling, it would get kind of tough. Trying to deal with different personalities, I think, was the hardest thing for me. Just because I unexpectedly tested as an extrovert. So a lot of my teammates were introverts, and then they would also give me another extrovert. And so they kept pairing us up. So, I mean, that was the hardest part, but I was able to kind of stick with my original team members because it changes every semester. So you're kind of like, you know who you do and don't want. But I was fortunate enough to have a team that I kind of stuck with, and our faculty was amazing, honestly. They gave us advisors that very first day of school. They stuck with us all through our careers there.
Oh, wow.
You know, they had like the different buildings open for when our exams would happen, and a lot of our professors would stick around. They would stay till like 2, 3 in the morning with us. You know, and they would go through over anything, and because again, it is team-based learning. You do want to excel well on your own, but the nice thing is you have your team to kind of support you and say, hey, you know, I know you're thinking of it this way, but here's a better mnemonic for it or something. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's the other thing I wanted to know. Everything you learn in pharmacy school, like now you know your medication by mind, like, oh no. So is it more of memorization? Like you just have to memorize everything? Or is it more conceptual to, for example, like anatomy and physiology, right? Talking about the same thing. It's just anatomy is this, and then physiology is more like this affects that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would say it's about half. It's half and half. A lot of it is brand and generics, like needing to know which biologic is this, which one's that one, or like if I have this brand, what is that generic? But a lot of it is application based as well. It's like, okay, here you have your medication. Tell me the brand and generic. What's its mechanism of action? How does it actually work in the body? What are the side effects? What are the dosings for it? What if I have this kind of condition, or what if I'm a child or an adult? So it is a lot of application. That's why they try to get us to focus on that and being able to counsel people as well. Because, you know, you're going to get questions from anywhere and everywhere. So you really want to know the ins and outs of a medication.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's always been like something I've been wondering. I'm like, how do these people remember like every single medication? Yeah. And then sometimes it's like not even just the generic name for it, but the actual scientific name.
Right.
I'm like, wow.
It's definitely practice. My sister can attest to this. Every time we have counseling sessions, so it's what they call them, every so often. So they give us like 10 different drugs, and they say, you know, patient can come in with this condition. It's going to be one of these drugs, and you're going to have to counsel them because they've never taken it before. They have never heard of it. So I would literally have her sit there, and I would talk through every single drug possible with her. And it's not really memorization, but it's being able to apply it and say, hey, okay, this is what's going to happen.
I know. Sometimes I try to impress my pharmacist. They're like, what are you trying to get? I'm like, acetaminophen?
Yeah. Like, here's your Tylenol, sir.
That's amazing.
I'm like, you know, little things. I'm like, you know, I just look in the back, and then that's what I try to go off. So trying to learn a little bit more on the way. Yeah. But no, that's great. Yeah. That's a great, you know, what other advice would you give? Like, I mean, that was great advice right there to kind of,
absolutely,
if you have siblings or if you have someone available at home to kind of keep practicing. I know it's more like a common sense thing, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes people feel buried. And when you're kind of in a hole, even though you see where the exit is, sometimes all you're looking around are the walls around you. Yeah. So sometimes you feel so scared or just stressed, and then you don't want to, you literally can't think straight.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for, you know, alone time if you really need it, but I would definitely say to lean on people, you know, use people. You have a lot of people who are around you who are looking for you to succeed.
Right.
I think sometimes we get so caught up in like, oh, I have so many friends, but are you experiencing friendship? Are you having conversations with people? Right. You know, it doesn't have to always be about, you know, school or work. It could just be about anything and everything.
The human experience.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's what people kind of forget is like, you know, okay, I should be happy because I have all these things, but are you really getting the most out of these things? Are you also being a good person to that other person? You know, or, you know, step out of your comfort zone and talk to someone who maybe you don't, you know, think is interesting, you don't know. Yeah. You know, I think that kind of helps us move forward.
Right.
It's exactly what we do. Try to meet interesting people and just talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, like, it really comes down to it because, you know, and I don't want to get too far away from off topic while, you know, talking about friendship and everything.
No, you're fine.
But yeah, like, I feel like your circle, that's why, like, I know it's a cliche, and I know a lot of people, you see it everywhere about, you know, choose your friends wisely and all that stuff. And I to to a degree that is true, because you're going to be as successful as the group people you surround yourself with, right? The people, if you're surrounded by people that are always striving, that always want more, then you'll always be hungry for more.
Yeah.
Versus if you're surrounded by people that are just, they're okay with where they are, and then they have all these excuses. And I'm talking about like excuses for anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you kind of start to develop that same mindset to where it's like, because, you all talk about it, you all are always thinking about it together.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like a crippling contentness.
Yeah.
I think for me that what also helped was just being able to talk to my parents. I think there's always that fear that because your parents are immigrants that they're not going to understand what's happening in the world.
Right.
I feel like I spent years and years just talking to my parents and trying to get them comfortable with what I was doing and letting them know, like, I still have a plan. I just am deviating it. I'm taking a different route,
Right.
And they were super supportive. They were just kind
That's
of
awesome.
like, we understand that we're not going to entirely understand these things, but we appreciate you being open and honest and having that conversation with us. So it's almost like training them in a sense. But they were super open about it. So I was, I'm always going to be grateful for that.
And real quick, where are your parents from and when did they come?
They're from Laos. My dad came when he was a teenager. My mom came when she was around 8 years old. So they were kind of scattered throughout the world, honestly. Part of my dad's family was in France, some in South America. He specifically came to the United States with his parents, and my mom came with her parents as well. And they eventually came to Fresno and, started their life and whatnot. And, of course, everyone wants you to have the American dream and to succeed and stuff. And, it's like the idea, you hear like, okay, doctors are what's successful,
Yeah.
So they were just kind of like, okay, let's just kind of help you get through school. Let's do as much as we can for you. And I think sometimes we get so scared that because our parents weren't born here or like went through the system that they don't understand what's happening. But it took a long time for us to really sit down, me and my siblings really, to sit down and have a conversation with my parents. And they've just been super open and honest about everything.
Oh, that's great to hear, because that's kind of like what we try to emphasize on this too, because, and I feel like that's just a general thing in the life of an immigrant, I feel like, right? Like, because the parents, they put so much effort and so much money, and they literally sacrifice their livelihood to be here in America, where they basically start over from zero.
Yeah.
Left everything they knew.
Yep. And, their best friends, their family, they're all left behind. And so they only want you to do your best.
Yeah.
And so it's just sometimes that gets overlooked for the troubled person.
Yeah.
The kids in the family, because they're thinking that their parents are, for whatever reason, won't understand, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just simply they feel like they're pressured all the time, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so that's great that you were able to open it with the family. And then on top of that, when you're going through pharmacy school, how long is the process? So I know, like, to be a doctor, you got to do med school, and then you got to do residency and all to then finally become licensed after you pass the exam. And so how is that?
So it's only 4 years. So the first 3 years are just your didactics. And then every summer you do go on a rotation. So in your first year, you go to a community pharmacy, and then your second year is a hospital. And then your third year, it's a clinic. And then your fourth year is when you just spend the entire year going to different pharmacies, clinics, hospitals, whatnot, just to learn like the actual practice. It's supposed to be where you kind of decide like where you really want to go on top of, your first 3 years. And then you can decide to go to residency. That is highly, highly competitive. You really just have to know that you want to go to residency, honestly, like when you start pharmacy school. So if you do decide to go to pharmacy, go into residency, it's about a year. It can take 2 years if you decide to do a second year residency. But if not, you can just go straight into taking your exams and whatnot.
Then what's the benefit of doing a residency and not doing one?
It's easier to get into like hospitals, or if you want to be like an advanced practice pharmacist, you already have that experience. It honestly opens a little more doors for you, just because you get to see like the other side of pharmacy. Most often, pharmacists or people who graduate from pharmacy school go straight into community pharmacy. Some of them go into hospitals and some go into clinics. We have a bunch of different clinics opening up now, so that's kind of the nice thing. In the past, it used to be, you either do residency or you go straight into community pharmacy.
So then, the pharmacies you see, like all the locations, are they owned and operated by their head Well, obviously not all of them. Some of them are working for an organization or whatever it may be. But I'm talking about like, a pharmacist to, if they were to, so I know a doctor, if they're going to open their clinic, that's on them. Like they are, that is their clinic. So it's the same thing with the pharmacist. If they want to open their own pharmacy, they're able to?
Yes, they can. So those would be like our independent pharmacies, which we do have here. It is a little bit harder of a process to go through.
Very different.
Yeah, but if you decide to go that route, more power to you,
Absolutely.
honestly. Yeah.
No, I advocate that as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then, so like, if you are going to open yours, do the pharmacists, do they also, how can I phrase this? So do they also have like partners that may own the organization, but the pharmacy is like run by the pharmacist? If that makes sense.
Yeah, potentially. Just because sometimes what makes pharmacies kind of run are these pharmacy benefit managers who kind of work with drug companies to set prices on prescriptions and whatnot. So sometimes something will fall in what they call like a formulary. Where like they'll cover these medications for X amount, and the pharmacy itself will make this amount back. Yeah, it's a whole other messy thing, but
so that's like a straight up business type of thing. That's the one that gets all the pharmacies a bad rep in terms of like it goes by, like you were saying, the sales of the pills.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they're nice because they're more personable. I know a lot of people who prefer independence because they'll directly deliver their medications home, or they're like, there's only like 50 people who come here, so they can have more one-on-one time.
But you can't have that worry of they don't like you, or because as happens with mom and pop shops, we can turn you away if we wish, or so on.
Yeah,
Usually
or because we're smaller, we don't have these kinds of medications for you. We can't,
at all times.
Yeah, or it's not worth it for us to be filling that kind of medication. You're better off going to like a chain.
So if you have like a sickly kid kind of thing, you're probably not going to want to take the chances.
Yeah, or if you need like a specialty medication, then you should go to like a bigger chain.
Gotcha.
So then, like with the pandemic that's going on, has that changed anything in terms of like the way the pharmacies operate?
Let's go there.
Yeah. Initially at the beginning was very stressful. When we started getting the vaccines, we were doing about 200 vaccines a day. And before that, it was nowhere near that. It was like maybe 20 a day. There are some pharmacies that are so busy that still do about, 40 to 50 a day, but it was a whole night and day thing. It was almost a nightmare, if I'm being 100% honest, because you'd have people lingering around waiting for extra doses, or
extra doses?
Yeah, extra doses at the beginning. You had to have an appointment. You couldn't just walk in, and you'd have to wait till the end of the day because they didn't want us to waste anything. Right. And it was very, very stressful.
Okay. So they were waiting for the pharmacy to restock. I thought they were like, all right, get me once. Okay, 15 minutes later, I'm ready for another shot. Why would they want another dose of the vaccine just to be like super vaccinated?
But you never know,
there's boosters they came out.
Yeah, because I remember when the pandemic first started, like I remember looking for testing sites.
Yes, testing was stressful. Because we had some pharmacies where, like when I initially started, it was like right when the pandemic hit. So we were, by that February, I got licensed in September. By that February, we were giving vaccines. We were already COVID testing. Every 15 minutes we had COVID tests. Every 15 minutes we had vaccines. So you'd have your drive-through running. You have like hundreds of people trying to get into their appointment times. And you're like, okay, but everyone needs to sit down for 15, 20 minutes. So like we need to figure out a smoother transition, but you're still trying to run your pharmacy. You're still trying to give your consultations, still trying to fill your medications and whatnot.
Did you have stores shutting down because your employees were getting sick or anything?
No.
You guys were handling it pretty well then.
Yeah, I think my initial store, we had 4 people get COVID, and there was only 6 of us. And then my store now, I think the same thing. I think there's only 7 of us, and I think 3 of us have avoided getting COVID or getting sick in general. So it was a lot of manpower, and we did kind of joke like, what's life going to be like when COVID's gone? Like, are we going to miss the chaos of everything?
I don't think that's going away at any point.
I don't, and then of course they add on crazy things like, prescribing random amounts of ivermectin.
So that's what I was going to ask. I'm like, okay, when all that was happening, again, we hold no opinion to anything.
Well, we got opinions, no facts. We got opinions, no facts.
But it's like, whatever side you kind of agree with, I'm not going to judge. I have my own, and I'm not going to push my own on you. And
right.
it'll be great if you don't push yours on us.
Of course
and
not.
So, yeah, like, when the pandemic was going on, did not necessarily prescriptions, but requests from patients themselves, like were there any phone calls, increase in phone calls, or increase of inquiries about ivermectin and all these other drugs that were like, the
Off-label.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot. It was, it's honestly, ivermectin is not a drug that is normally stocked in any of the pharmacies I worked at. There's maybe like a box or two. Right. Most often it just expires, and so because we don't really dispense it. So it was a lot of patients who had paper prescriptions saying, hey, I'm trying to get this filled somewhere, and they're not taking it because they're saying it's off label, it's not approved. And, I'm totally for off label medications. I think that's, it's the brilliant part of medications. Take Viagra, for example. It was for hypertension initially. And then wait, actually this helps with ED. So, now it's more towards ED. It was initially off label, but now it's the primary indicator. So I'm totally for it. My only thing was ivermectin had no standard dosing. We would get them from anywhere and everywhere. It'd be like 5 tablets today, 6 tablets tomorrow, or 8 tablets a week. It was just, there was no standardized dosing for it. And I think that's just where pharmacists had a lot of hesitation. But it was a lot of inquiries about that. If the phone rang, it was either ivermectin, COVID testing, or getting a vaccine.
Is that due to not enough testing in the lab of ivermectin, or not enough information being sent out? What do you think?
I think it was just not enough information. I understood the mechanism of action. I get where they were like, potentially it could help with COVID. And I understood that, that's just how off-label things work. Or, we think it's going to work one way, and then you're like, wait, actually, there has this slight benefit on the other side. Yeah. So it's like, I totally understand that. Yeah, I think there just wasn't enough information to really go around. So there was a lot of hesitancy on well, is this right? Is this not right?
Right, there wasn't
Do I feel
proof.
Comfortable? Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Well, okay, and we'll kind of jump out of that rabbit hole. But, do you, being a pharmacist, do you enjoy what you do?
I do. I genuinely do. I love my job. I love just talking to people and, getting to manage my team and just, being there for everybody.
So you're able to, okay, that's great, because people need to, I really want to, whenever I interview people, I really want to get their honest take on their profession, how hard it is, because you never know who might be listening in or watching, and then they want to become that, and then they try, and then it ends up not being what they thought it was going to be.
Right, because you're the only one that really knows any shadow or dark corner of the profession.
I mean, obviously, I think every job has its negatives and whatnot.
Stresses are in every position.
Yeah, and I remember working 14-hour days for 4 or 5 days in a row, and then getting a day off, and then having to do a 12-day stretch, or being there from opening to closing. It's not always glamorous, and you will have patients who don't agree with what you're doing, or who don't understand why they can't get their medication, and you'll have technicians who have been yelled at and aren't in the best moods, or everyone's just burnt out.
Or some people that demand it.
I
like to talk about that.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of people who told me they're going to come and fight me in the pharmacy.
Right,
and I'm like, I will be in the white coat.
Police officer.
Yeah. It's a lot. I mean, like I said, it's not the most glamorous thing. I would recommend if you want to be in pharmacy, or if you want to be a community pharmacist, go talk to your community pharmacist and see if you can, just shadow them for a day or two. I think that'd be really beneficial. Just because I didn't really know what to expect. Everyone kind of thinks of pharmacists as people who just slap labels on bottles and send them out to people.
Right.
Yeah.
And
they're just the pill people.
Yeah.
No, that's honestly what I thought before I'd met you and started to really understand it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I had no idea what was going on behind the counter.
Yeah.
Well, okay. And then what do you think that, it's a good thing you brought that up, Justin. What do you think about a certain perception that people have? Maybe there's something they don't know about, being behind the counter. What do you think is something that no one really knows about, but then to kind of expand on, why it's important? can you
Yeah.
provide an example?
I mean, I think first and foremost that pharmacists are the most accessible people, like health professionals that are out there, honestly. Like you could walk into any pharmacy and ask them a question, even about like Dr. Scholl's insoles or something,
Right.
and they have some kind of knowledge about it. But that also pharmacists aren't just people who put pills in a bottle. We do have a lot of clinical resources at the palm of our hands. The nice thing is like where I work, the system automatically will pick up drug-drug interactions. It'll give me the monographs. It'll tell me like, okay, this enzyme interacts with this enzyme, or, this part of this drug can cause an allergy that patient has reported that they've had in the past. So I think it's important to talk to your pharmacist, even if you have the smallest questions, and that pharmacists are actually very knowledgeable about over-the-counter medications and herbal supplements, because, we do have to be adapting with all the new medications. Like when I graduated pharmacy school, there was already like 4 new drugs. And I'm like, wait, is this going to be on my exam?
Right.
Yeah, that was going to be the other thing. I'm glad you brought it up, because I almost forgot to ask, like, how do you go about that? So being a pharmacist now, so let's say if a new drug has been approved for public use, after going through all these trials and everything, you as a pharmacist, do you have to then kind of read up on the research? Do you have to conduct your own? Do you have to wait for some type of approval, maybe from management or
Right.
like what is the process there?
So normally with new drugs, if it gets approved, it probably already comes straight to the pharmacy. But I personally like to take it upon myself to read about the medications. I'm not going to know every single medication in the pharmacy. I don't now, honestly, I don't know every single one. But if it is something new, or if it's something that someone is curious about, I will take it upon myself to kind of read those things. The nice thing about new medications when they come out is they always come with some kind of drug information. And it's usually like 15, 20 pages long. But I like to read those things,
Okay. I was just going to ask that too,
Yeah.
where you were getting your information from now that you're not in school and you still have to school yourself.
Yeah. The nice thing is like they have manufacturer guidelines and everything like that. And we can still use things like Micromedics and just like different pharmacy websites that will tell you about the medications. And then on top of that, it'll link where that information came from. And we in pharmacy school learn to read about clinical trials.
Right.
So I'll try to spend as much time as I can reading on those things. Obviously, I'm not going to know everything and anything.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. Most often it is more generics coming out or like a new dose of a medication. I think right now, the biggest thing are weight loss medications that are coming out. So everyone's just kind of like rushing to get it and thinking it's some kind of
Really?
fix
We're
all.
gonna have to
Yeah.
get our dietitian back on.
Yeah.
There we go again with the magic pill.
Right.
You're gonna piss them off.
Yeah, I'm curious because I did have a patient say that, I was like, I think they figured out how to help people lose weight, and I'm like, I don't know about this one. Like, let's wait,
Right.
But
Oh, you should have been like, you mean diet
right,
and exercise?
Right.
the two
God
things
forbid
you don't
gotta eat.
want.
Yeah.
God forbid.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. And the last question. Is there any message as a pharmacist you might want to send to maybe someone that wants to become a pharmacist someday? Is there something you want to tell them to, really either keep them on track, or maybe they find out that maybe it's not for me? Any special message, whatever it may
Both
be,
as a
positive or
pharmacist
negative, it doesn't
and as a
matter.
manager.
Well, okay. So, I mean, like I said before, it's just go talk to your pharmacist and see if you can just spend the day with them. I think people get kind of scared because some pharmacies can be very hectic, but they're not all the same. Everyone is completely different. Different management styles are different. Like
Kaiser is wild.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, go try different pharmacies, go talk to different pharmacists and figure out their different fields and see if that genuinely is for you. I'm always taking students and just interns and whatnot. I mean, free labor, why not?
Right.
But I'm always trying to take students. I'm always trying to take people under my wing. I personally like the style of, just lead by example. So that's just my kind of thing. And if you want more hands-on things, a lot of the pharmacy schools will host different days where they'll teach you like the ins and outs of being a pharmacist, or you'll kind of get to experience like, you know, just taking blood pressure, understanding how to take someone's blood glucose. Like go to those, go talk to other students and see how they're liking their programs. Because I guarantee you, you know, there are programs that you are absolutely going to hate, and there are some that you're going to love. It's why I went to school here. It's because it's a team-based learning. I didn't want to be in a lecture hall. You know, that's not my style of learning. I like to actually interact with people. So, I mean, go use as many resources as you can. If you can find a connection with someone, or if you can network, I would definitely recommend that as well. You know?
Okay.
Beautiful.
Well, that was a great message.
What?
Thank you for your time, Alisia. And with that, we will go ahead and end this episode. Thank you so much for coming by.
So much.